All right. Well, welcome to our Wednesday evening Bible study. We're in First Samuel. We've been doing a survey of the book of First Samuel. We're going to try to continue through 11 through 31. We're actually in chapter 18. So if you want to jump on over to chapter 18, we are not going verse by verse. So if you want to scan as we're kind of going through and discussing the key points of the chapters, I have the outlines in the back for the overall lessons for these chapters. Um, it's a lot to go through. At first I was over ambitious, trying to think, oh wow, we can just kind of fly through, and then I realized there's just still a lot of amazing things, even at a survey level, to kind of bring up and remember about these books. That's my goal. My goal is, as we go through these surveys of these books on Wednesday night, is not that you're going to have verse by verse breakdown, but more comfortable familiarity with that book. Kind of the main ideas, that Hannah at the beginning of Samuel, um, Eli, the things and all the processes as we come through. And what is the book about? The book is about the rise of the kings period, transitioning out of the judges and moving into this king period. The rise of Saul and the fall of Saul and the rise of David. That's really the first book. The second Samuel we'll get to, it's all about David. And then we're going to go to the kings eventually. We'll get into there. So as we settle in, like I said, open up your Bible if you want and turn on over to 18. And like I said, kind of scroll through. That's what I'm kind of doing along with the key points and discussion. And if you hear something, see something, or something I'm going to run over the top of and miss, go like that and I'll stop. I also have our social media going, so love to have you participate if you're live with us right now. And if you're not and you're watching this in the future, you can also drop it into the comments and I get them and I'll respond to them as well. Before we get a little further, let's go and have a quick word of prayer. Our most gracious Father, thanks again for this blessed moment in our lives that we're able to come here to study your word, especially this historical book of Samuel, as we learn the way that you have expressed yourself and the problems and hardships and the struggle that people had in uniting this kingdom. And through the reign of Saul and David, that we can learn some lessons on different principles of our spiritual life and our relationship with you as well. And we hope that we'd be able to take those and remember those lessons. We ask this in Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so where does it fit in? Like I already said, it fits in with looking at the leadership of the judges, Samuel giving way into king. They want a king. They want to be like all the other nations. They want to be like the other kids down the block, but that's a problem. And Israel is feeling insecure, but their insecurity is because their insecurity in spiritual. It's a spiritual, really, insecurity between them and God more than that. When they do select Saul, he appears to be the guy. I mean, he fits it. He's got the stature. He seems to have all this, and he has a strong, but his character collapses pretty quickly. We see that pretty quickly. Now remember, God chose him. People didn't choose him. God also chose David. They're like opposites. And he did it on purpose. Why didn't he start with David? I mean, couldn't we have just saved a lot of years of misery and some of the horrible things that he did? Yeah, it kind of pulls out, and shows the comparison abstract and contrast. And so sometimes you got to see the bad before you can appreciate the good as well. Um, Unfortunately, that's what a sinful world should be doing to us. A sinful world, we should look around and go, oh, no, 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 no. Without sin, like Paul kind of said, how would I know what is right from wrong? And so when we see the bad and we suffer through that, then we know the glorious goodness of God. So yeah, it's a good contrast, but he picked Saul. And like I said, he has that appearance, but God knows his heart as well. And the people are going to know his heart pretty quick too. What's interesting is that as Saul falls out of favor with God, is that David is then anointed, but not publicly. He's chosen, but there's a different anointment. We'll see later on, especially 2 Samuel, but this private anointment that occurs is something very private. And it's not kept a well secret. We'll see where eventually it comes out, and you can see it in the spirit of Saul. Um, and he spends a long time. We looked last week. If you want to go back and review, look at the number of years before he actually ends up ruling, from the age possibly of as young as 15, 10 to 15, some say, to then the age of 30 before he starts to rule. And it's not even united. It's only Judah. And so another 7 years go before you get there's like a civil war period. So it's like, oh man, all the troubles that he goes through. And that's where a lot of these lessons come from. So how many commanders did you get in your career? And how many did you see in that type of a view where you'd get a change of command and you'd have a commander come in? I remember that as like battalion commanders and company commanders in the military. And we'd have some, we'd go, oh no, that guy. Either reputation, but a lot of times the look, their stature. I had one of my best commanders was 5'1" black man. And he was dynamite. I mean, he was a pathfinder, a ranger. He was hard charging and the most political, suave guy. I mean, so wise. But when people saw him, they saw this midget. That's the way they kind of looked at him, not this 6'1". And here I was, most of his lieutenants towered over him, because I'm serious. He was like 5'1". He said he barely got in the military. But it was amazing. Same thing. You see the outside, but on the inside, he was an amazing leader. And then I've had those that just like, oh yeah, we want this guy to be our commander. And he just strack looking and all that. And you find out, oh, they're garbage. They're terrible. So that's a valuable lesson when we look at each other as Christians too, huh? You see a Christian that looks like a hobo, somebody with a bunch of tattoos, or whatever might be different from us. And we do that because that's kind of the way we are, you know. It's a dangerous thing. We have to check ourselves as well. So as a storyline, 11 through 31, just kind of quick, and then we'll jump into more specific individual chapters. We see that the first 11 and 12 is where Saul is confirmed, but then Samuel warns him what you're going to get. 13 and 15, quickly we see him failing. His first failure is to not wait for Samuel to come when the Philistines are arriving, because the Israelites are too afraid when they see the Philistines, and they panic and they start like some of them start hiding. And so he takes it upon himself, like, I got to take action. Well, the action was to wait for Samuel to come and do the sacrifice. And he didn't wait for him. And so that was the first fail. The second fail, of course, we'll see, is about Amalekites, not destroying them. So, and that was in order to total decimate and remove him, kill him. He doesn't do it. He brings Agag back, brings back the best of the best, the spoils, and then that's it. That's when Samuel announces to him, the Lord's going to tear the kingdom away from you. And right then is when then we see where he goes and he finds David and anoints him privately, and that whole interesting process again, even within his own family, his dad even, right? Well, here's my boys. And the very first, even Samuel, remember? Samuel looked at the first son and said, oh, here's the anointed in front of me. And the Lord tells him, no. This message is as much for Samuel, isn't it? Because that's what's fascinating. Now, this is like I said before, Samuel's probably the most spiritually minded Israelite, Hebrew. And even he was falling for it. Reminds me of Peter. Peter could be brilliant in one moment and still miss the mark. And even Samuel, first kid out, he looks at him and goes, this must be him. mope and weep. Yeah, yeah. And that's fascinating because we talked about the fact that he was so upset that they're going to pick a king. They want a king. And then we find that when he's rejected, he's weeping and moping. And God goes, how long are you going to hang out weeping about this guy? Get up. I got somebody you need to go anoint. Now, this is where I want to kind of bring this out because a lot of times, he's anointed, and then we see him going into the service of Saul. Because Saul, and then the Lord sends an evil spirit. He doesn't send the devil, okay? When we talk about it's a malice, it's a bad spirit. It's a spirit meant to do bad to him. If you think about Michael and some of the archangels and some of the things they did, they were bad things that they would carry out because it was a judgment of God being put upon people or a nation. And so I don't want us to see when you hear that, and then the evil spirit, God didn't open up the gates to hell and said, give me one of your bad boys and I want to send him over to Saul. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this angel is going to delude. We see that, is it in Isaiah or Ezekiel? Oh my goodness, my brain. But basically it was God. I should have looked that up. Basically, God is having a conversation with the host of hosts, and he wants to send the people to where they will not believe their spirits. And he asks for a volunteer, and there's one that steps up and says, I'll go down and do that to him. I can't believe I just totally vapor locked that up. And so that's where the illustration that God is using one of his own, but it's going down and doing bad and provoking him in a bad way to where he's going to respond. And it torments him in a way. And so from that point, you see that happens. And so what do? They say, hey, what's interesting is we read that his servants as well said he has an evil spirit sent from God. It's almost like, how did they know that? Because providentially, somehow God provided that to them, and they know that they need to seek out a musician, somebody to soothe him. And they know of this shepherd boy how would they know that he even plays an instrument? He's out there in the meadows with sheep. I mean, it's possible, but I think all this is providential where God is bringing David into the house of Saul. Now, when it comes back after we see that he defeats Goliath, the question comes up, who is this guy's father? And in some translation, it almost sounds like, who is this guy? Like he doesn't know. No, he knows. It has more to do with the idea. Now, remember, he's already got an evil spirit tormenting him. And so Saul's already getting into the wickedness in his thinking. And it's more about, because one, his promise was what? His daughter in marriage and taxes. No taxes for the family. And it's all about pedigree, family. And so that's one of the things is finding out, well, who's his dad? Who is he? So it's not because he doesn't know who he is, but it's about the idea of the promises that he had made. But we know that he's not going to fulfill those. We'll talk about that tonight. What we're going to get into tonight is when this total out hatred and trying to kill him is the last, 18 through 26. And then 27 through 31 is when basically I call it the collapse of Saul, where he just finally spirals out. But we find David being preserved, David being taken care of throughout all of this. So we jump to 18, right after David kills Goliath, this bond builds with Jonathan immediately. And we start to see real quickly how Jonathan is so different from his dad. His dad is selfish. He's trying to preserve his kingdom, and he doesn't care spiritually. He's going to do what he can to preserve his kingdom. He's already been told it's going to be ripped from him. He already has demented thinking about everybody around him. And Jonathan, though, is right the opposite. Right when he has that conversation about after killing David, him and Jonathan have a conversation. Jonathan goes up to him and starts talking to him. And then they have a covenant. you see there where Jonathan gives David his coat, he gives him his sword, he gives him his armor, and immediately David goes to work. David becomes this warrior and starts serving. And of course, the problem is Saul is starting to use him to try to get rid of him. What's that? Yeah, that's the irony, isn't it? That's the problem with an evil mind. And that's the problem with an evil mind that thinks they can outsmart God. Because they were falling into exactly what God was wanting. God's wanting to build build David up, prepare him to be a king. Because we will know at the end of David's life, there are no enemies for Israel, nowhere around their borders. They are the most prosperous, the most solid. They expanded to the fullest Solomon will expand it some more, but there is no greater gold standard than David by the end of his life. And a lot of it is him being such a warrior, all the preparation that we're going to see that he goes through. When we get to 2 Samuel, we'll see all of this torment that he goes through, how it prepared him. And I brought up, we as Christians, many of the things and suffering that we go through make us better Christians, make us better servants. There's nobody, nobody likes to listen to somebody who has never experienced something that tells you how to handle it, right? They lose credibility right off. But when somebody has suffered, gone through things that you can relate to, you understand it. I just love politicians who have never been to Las Cruces, New Mexico, tell us how it should be, right? Oh, well, we know what you need. And it's like, you don't even know. Don't sit up there far off places. Even in New Mexico, people in Santa Fe, they don't have a contact with us as like they think they do. And they try to rule us like they do the North. And so it's that idea, again, where God is preparing a leader that can empathize. Now remember, David is also a type of Christ figure. So there's a lot of things that when Jesus came in the flesh, what did he do? He experienced all the suffering and the things that we go through. Why? Because then he could absolutely stand before his God Father and represent us. And you and I can have the confidence in knowing that he knows exactly what we go through. Jesus wept, remember? Jesus asked for the cup to be removed, and yet he knew it had to happen. He looked at the cross and knew it was joyful because what he would accomplish, but he was submissive. All those things are the same thing. That's why as we go through and look at David, I want you to think about Christ. Think about it. Because these are the shadows, those things in which when we look in the Old Testament and we just read the hard lines of it, the black and white, and sometimes we miss the beauty of what God was trying to prepare everyone for. And it's interesting because what do they want? When Jesus comes, they want a David. That's what they want. They want a physical King David type, not Solomon. That's kind of interesting, isn't it? Not Solomon. They want a David. And so, and it was kind of shadowed throughout the prophets, wasn't it? That this David type was coming. And so he begins this fear, this terror. And Saul starts to see that, you know what? God is away from me. And he can sense, and I think he knows, we can tell. He never says it out loud until a little later on. But initially, you can tell he knows David is a chosen one. And that hatred is to remove him. And like you said, every time he sends him out on a suicide mission, it backfires. He comes back. More credibility, better songs. They're singing songs, and that's what sets him off at the very beginning. He's starting to look, but he still has the humility that this king doesn't. Because you can see whenever, like with the first wife, that he's promised the first, daughter. And Saul just gives her away to another man that just before they were to be married. And then says, well, my second daughter, you can have her. But I don't want a dowry. In other words, money, sheep, or something like that. All I want is 100 foreskins. So you got to go kill 100 Philistines. Hoping, because he's using the fact that his daughter loves David as a trap. He thinks it's cool. Oh, this is it. I'll get him on this one. It doesn't work. So they end up marrying. And then we see how that, again, he attempts to kill David. At one point, he throws a spear at him twice. So David's picking it up. He's like, okay. And then another time, Saul announces to everybody, says, hey, go get David and bring him up. He wants to kill him. And so they go to his house, or however it's configured there in the palace, however it was. But he fakes like he's sick. And Micah covers for him and puts something in a bed to make it look like he's asleep. Oh, well, he's real sick. And then the king goes, bring the bed. Go get him in the bed and just bring the whole thing up and we'll kill him. And that's when they find out Michael had helped him escape. She turns because then he goes, why did you do that and betray me? And she's like, well, he said you got to help me or, I don't want to have to kill you. We'll learn more about her, won't we, later on. Some of the things she may love him, but there's something about her that she got from her daddy. Some selfishness as well. So he runs to where Samuel's at. He goes to Ramah. And there, then he turns and he'll come back down to, I got a map somewhere. Where did it go? Oh, here it comes. And he comes back down to Goliath, where the king's at, where he's reigning. And he tries to find out through Jonathan, hey, what's going on? What have I done? And Jonathan interceded for him once, and he lied to him, Saul. Saul goes, okay, I'm not going to kill him, and turns right around and tries to kill him again, and that's when he runs up to where Samuel's at, comes back down, tries to figure it out again. And at that moment, that's where this covenant again between Jonathan and David comes out. But in that, it's kind of covert the way that they decide that Jonathan's going to try to find out, is my dad really trying to kill you or not? And so the idea was basically by arrows, that if I come out and I shoot him a certain way, overshoot him, and tell my assistant to go over and get him in a certain way, it's not good. He is going to try to kill you. But if I shoot a different way, then you're okay. Well, it goes bad. We know. Jonathan comes out. He finds out, and he shoots it that, no, you need to run. They end up, after he sends off his assistant and meets, and they sit and talk. And this is where they weep very emotionally, that they have this bond. And they make a covenant to each other's house. In other words, that, lost my projector up there, just in time, nice. And so they have that relationship where they build this with the house of Saul and David. And that's going to come back because later on, Meshbosheth is going to be the only surviving person from the family. Let me try to get that back up because I do want to. The thing about Jonathan as well is he is considered the prince, the crown prince, which means he's the one that's to be king. And what I think is interesting is how much he's willing to give up that over his relationship with David and his spiritual relationship with God. That is far more important to him than anything, is to please God, and yet he's going to give up his opportunity to be a king. And that's the opposite of his dad, isn't it? His dad's the other way around. It's like, no, I'm going to kill anything, destroy everything that I can to keep my family in rule. So this is kind of a map of the history as we're going to go through this. Oh my goodness, it jumped all the way there. Let me jump over. So this is kind of the whole period of the time of the last section of Samuel here, as he travels. If you go all the way up, I don't know, it's a little red dot. You can see it. If you're colorblind, you won't be able to see it at all. But Goliath here is where Saul is ruling from, and he serves in the court there. But after he runs, he is going to leave there, and he flees to Ramoth, like I said, about where Samuel's at. And then he'll return back down and have that conversation with Jonathan to figure out, what do I need to do? And he finds out, no, my dad's going to kill you, man. He's after you. So he flees to the Philistines, to Gath, to Achash, the king there. And the king there, that's where he feigns the madness. But he's afraid. We'll see where he is pretty afraid of what's going on there. So he then flees the Philistine area, and he comes over to the cave of Adullam. And this is where we'll see where all the misfits and rejects come there, and he gathers them up. And then he takes his parents all the way over here to Moab because he's afraid Saul's going to kill them. So he takes his family, his mother and father, out of the picture. And then he comes back over to the stronghold in Masada, which they believe that's the area there toward the bottom of the map of where he goes. So then from this strong point, where we'll start back over here, we see that he comes up. He's told, the Lord tells him to come up to the forest of Hereth, and they believe it's in this. It's kind of believed that it's in this region right here. But at that time, while he's there, then the Philistines attack Keilah. And so he comes out of hiding, and he comes over and protects Keilah. But Saul finds out, and then he's going to come out after him from there. And so he then, from here, he flees back to Zipher in this region to hide. And from there, he barely escapes and down to Maon, this region. And then from there, he then comes all the way over to Igleed. And this is a cave area. This is a beautiful place if you ever get some photos of it. Has the encounter with the king in the cave. And then he flees from there back over to this other stronghold that he's been in. And he stays there for a while. And so all this roaming around, again, like I said, from about 18 all the way through 30, all this timeline is happening through here. Well, at that time, this is when we find Abigail, the story of Abigail. And he then comes out over here and marries Abigail. This is when he is going to kill her husband because he has been rude to his men and trying to give money, give food, give support. And Abigail intercedes. And so that's where he's there. And then finally, he just finally decides, you know what? As long as I stay in this area, Saul's going to continue to pursue me. So he then goes back into Philistine territory in Gath, back to the same king that he feigned to be crazy in front of. And he then from there is going to be there until the death of Saul. And he reigns there. So that's just kind of all the crazy area and the traveling. And if you look at the topo and the terrain, it's pretty rough. It's not easy terrain. This was difficult. Hard times, in other words, this entire period. So now let's back up. After he fled that initially and goes up to Ramah, he goes up to Ramah, comes back, and then he'll flee over to Nob. Now, Nob is south again, back just a little north of Jerusalem area. They believe again, because a lot of this, they don't know exact locations. And that's where the priests are at. And Ahimelech is the priest that he has to talk with as he's running. And he says, do you have any food? And he says, no, all I have is a showbread, right? And who can eat that? Well, that's all supposed to be for the priests. Does that sound familiar in the New Testament? Anything that about the showbread? They're eating on the Sabbath and they're harvesting and the that's right. Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, and Jesus uses this example basically where mercy and human need in relationship to the Sabbath, which is more important, the Sabbath or somebody that has needs mercy and has a human need, because this is where Ahimelech goes. All I've got is a showbread, but the stuff we've just taken off, it really wasn't to be there, and so he eats it. But he also, what else? Something significant that he gets. Mm-hmm. Yeah. They were pure. Which in some ways, that's not a requirement. Where did Ahimelech come up with that? He's like, okay, you can eat the showbread if you have remained pure. It's like, okay. But also remember, David is not being straight up about what's going on between him and the king. You remember whenever Samuel went to go anoint him? Samuel was scared to death of Saul, that Saul was going to kill him. This is kind of bad because Ahimelech doesn't know. David lies to him. He tells him, he goes, "Oh, I'm on a mission for the king and we had to leave in haste. And so we need food. You don't even have a sword?" I mean, Ahimelech's kind of buying into this and he must be scratching his head going, So he goes ahead and feeds him and he says, "You have any weapons?" He goes, "Well, all I got is a sword of Goliath," which is cool because we don't know where it went after that, huh? Last time we hear of his sword is when he chopped off Goliath's head. And then we don't know where it went. Went to the priests, which is interesting. It has, anyway. So he ends up with a sword, but there's somebody there witnessing this whole thing. Doeg, an Edomite. And he's going to rat them out. But he observes this and he's going to go back and report what goes on. This is when then David leaves from there, and he travels over to Gad before the king Achash. And when he's there, the people there, the Philistines, go, "This guy's David. He's the one that's killed all of our brethren." And so they take him before the king, and that's when David's like, "Uh-oh, I'm in trouble." And so he comes in babbling and drooling and on his beard and just looking ridiculous. And I love the way Achash goes, don't I have enough babblers around and fools in this area? You got to bring me this one? And so he doesn't buy it. And so he gets away, and that's when he's like hightails out. So he feigns that madness. It's not a high point for David. Think about it. The humiliation. You're the anointed. I could see a lot of young men going, "I can act like that. I'm the anointed of God. God will take care of me." And he's right. Think about it. Do you think that God's going to let Achash, this Philistine king, harm him? No. So why did David have to act goofy and silly? Why did he lower himself like that? It shows, in other words, a fear, a true fear against his faith, right? We already know he's a kid after God's heart. God blesses him. He's going to take care of him. He's got plans for him. And so he knows this. That's why it's beautiful. When you read the Psalms, read the title of the Psalms. Because a lot of those Psalms are historic. And there's some that are written about this moment, about the terror that he felt when he was going through this experience. But yet, that's where we talk about fear and faith sometimes, the challenge that even we have. And so even he has this type of fear, but he does have the faith. So, you know, he's still learning obedience under pressure. That's one of the things that we see in these earlier phases, I think. And so he flees from there. He goes to the cave of Adullam. And while he's there, Saul finds out from the good old Edomite that they had ratted him out. That's where he was at. And that's in between in this is when Saul goes up there to Nob, goes down to Nob, confronts Ahimelech, and I love the way Ahimelech tries to say, look, how would I know? He's your captain of captains. He's the hero of Israel. So how was I to know this? Saul is blind to it. He doesn't care. Now, he doesn't have the guts to do it himself. He doesn't have the guts to even order somebody that is Hebrew to carry out an execution on fellow Hebrews. He uses an Edomite. He tells Agag, kill him. And he massacres. It says women, men, animals, everything in that city there where all those priests were. But one does escape. So David in chapter 23, we see where he is in the wilderness and he hears about the Philistines coming up against the city of Keilah. Who should be protecting them? The king, Saul. Saul's sitting back in Gilead in his little fancy house, and he doesn't take action. The only time he takes action is after David rescues the city, and the only reason he's going to take action is because he wants to come down to get David. And every one of these moments, also something that's important to look at, is he will ask Goliath. It's got to be on the mix. There we go. But he inquires of the Lord about, is Saul going to come down and try to seek me? And the Lord says, yes. Are the people here going to turn me over to him? And the Lord says, yes. And so David has to run. Even after that, Saul tried to trap him. And what's interesting is as soon as he hears that he's left, he just stays back. It's like, don't you care that maybe the Philistines will come back again now that David's gone? There's nobody down there to protect them. No. It's all about David, right? And in chapter 23, we see where Jonathan makes this is the last trip, the last time they will see each other, and he strengthens him, and he strengthens the covenant they have. But this relationship is focused in the Lord, in God. And that's what I mean about Jonathan. Jonathan is so focused on the righteousness of God over the righteousness of his father and himself in losing the king. He kind of says, I know now you're going to be king, and I will be second to you. I will serve you. I will stand beside you. Sadly, we know that's not going to happen, right? He has to be taken out, unfortunately. This goes back to dynasties. If you've got a bloodline left, there could be a rebellion and think, well, we'll kill the king, and now we got Jonathan, and he's royalty himself. And so there's always that possibility where Jonathan would be a conflict in the future. But in that last meeting they have is pretty emotional between them in this covenant they do. Now, in the one strong place, Saul mounts up an expedition to come after and seek him. And while he's there, and that's again, the terrain, it seems crazy. You'd say, well, how did he get into a cave where David's at and go to relieve himself, go to the bathroom, and then sneak up on him? If you've ever seen some pictures of some of these caves, it's crazy. It really, there's some of these caves. One they believe is Adullam. It is huge. It's got a smaller opening. Now remember, when the misfits and those who are disgruntled, there's over 400 then, and it will grow to 600 that he has with him. But Saul, and again, I think this is providence. It wasn't haphazard. I mean, you're in the wilderness. You're out there, and how is it that all of a sudden Saul is in the same place going to the bathroom that David and his men are there? And that is one of the biggest tests, isn't it? Because his men see it as providence. They see it as providence in a way that God's not saying is providence. David doesn't see it that way either. They think, aha, God has brought him right to you. He doesn't have, his bodyguards are out front. Kill him. Let's start your reign. And to me, there's a part of me that goes, yeah. Why would you not? I mean, he's evil. And we know now remember, he slaughtered all the priests, the women, the children. This man is gone mentally. It's like, yeah, do it. But David, this is what sets him so apart. He's not looking at the fact that, yes, I'm anointed, but what he's looking at is, this is not the time. It's not my job to take out another anointed one. And we'd say, no, take him out, like I said. But David gets it. So instead, he cuts off a piece of his robe, which again, that's pretty slick. How close can you get and sneak up on somebody? That's pretty crazy. And when Saul leaves the cave and walks out, then David comes out. When David walks out, then he announces, hey, I could have done this. I could have killed you. And we see this vein of kind of repentance and proclamation. Oh, David, you're right. You're the anointed. And it's funny. It's almost like prophetic. I don't think he wanted to hear the words he said coming out of his own mouth, because he's announcing out loud that he's identifying that, David, you're the man. You're the guy. The Lord's chosen you. And he breaks off his pursuit. Well, that doesn't last long. You can talk all you want, but it didn't change his heart one bit. So he admits to that. While they're in the wilderness in chapter 25, we find a time of harvest. Nabal is a very wealthy man. And he has sent a request very humbly through his servants, through his men, to ask for some support. He's very wealthy, okay? He's not like scrapping by, and so whatever he's making, he's very wealthy. He has a lot of resources. That's why David asked. And they were very polite, and when they requested support, Nabal is totally rude and just tears into him. And so when the men come back and report to David, this is where David had a temper. We have this little boy, we kind of think, David had a temper. And he mounts up and starts to come back. And he's going to kill Nabal. This is where his righteous wife hears what they did and intercedes and tries to stop. And so she sets up a welcoming and apologizes. And she's actually a little more sound mind, because when she stops David, she goes, you don't really want to do this. This is not right. She has more wisdom in letting him know. And it's a humble, strategic, but it's theologically powerful, because she appeals to the Lord's purpose for David. Here's this lady out there, think about this. This is how, that David's not alone like he thinks. He's not just some bandit running on this. People are aware. And she brings this up. This is not you. This is not what the Lord wants from you. And so this is when the ball has what they call stone heart, basically dies, sudden death. Now, this is an interesting providential situation to where there's a judgment coming on. I think God's bringing on the ball because of the evilness of him. You have a woman who is very spiritual, very righteous, having to live with this hateful person. This hateful person is extremely wealthy and full of resources. So when the ball dies and David marries her, guess what he gets? He gets a very good wife. Ah, you went to the money, didn't you? Gotcha. I'm joking. I went there too. It's like, whoa, my bank account just doubled. But he got both, didn't he? He got a beautiful woman and he got a wife, and there was a judgment on a very evil man happen. So it's kind of interesting. It's bolstering him as well. I mean, because when you become king, this nation's going to be in shambles. And he shares. That's something you see in the heart of him later on, how David takes and he shares back to the elders in Judah some of the stuff that he gets. Chapter 26, we see again David sparing Saul again. But this time it's a little interesting because in the wilderness there, he sneaks up by night in the camp, and he takes Saul's spear and a water jar right under the nose of Abner. Now, Abner's going to play a big role. Abner's not a good guy. He's a warrior, man. He's probably got a lot of PTSD, and you're dealing with this king. But it's interesting because it's like David in the morning, he's standing across again in a safe distance, and it's almost like he's provoking all of them. I could have killed him again. I could have killed you again. And I got your spear. I could have taken the spear when I had it in my hands and drove it through you. But that repeated testing of restraint, I think, is showing his conviction. And it's not just by accident at all. And that's when he finally, it's like, you know what? That's it. I'm going to keep running around. Saul's just going to keep coming after me. And by the way, the Ziphites are the ones who also rat him out again. It's like people are selling him out. He's constantly going to be on the run because there's a bounty on him. And so people are going for the money. They think they can, take over that way. While he's at the Philistines, it's interesting that the fact that him going back again, this is King Achan. Remember the guy when he went before that king, he's drooling and acting like a fool. He goes back and he pledges his allegiance to him. And in that, he asks for a location for him and his people, his men. He's got over 600 men plus families and everything else they have. And so he gives him the city of Ziklag. And it's just far enough out of sight that it gives him some stealth so he can do things and make it look like he's a good proselyte to the Philistines. So he's going out and he's attacking, but he's attacking the Amalekites and others that are not, he's not attacking the Hebrews. But when he comes back, he tells the king says, well, so where you been? He goes, oh, I've been out there killing those Hebrews. And the king buys it. He thinks, oh, wow, you're a stench to them now because you've been out there killing them. And he loves it. He thinks that it's, wow, you've done a great job because now you're so repulsive because now you have killed Hebrews. And so they're never going to take him back. But the thing that he did, which is vicious, but when he would attack the Amalekites or any of those cities, he killed all the witnesses. That's pretty brutal, isn't it? Why'd he do that? He did it because he wanted, go ahead. He didn't want him to say, well, you're out there killing Amalekites. You're out there, you're not killing any Hebrews. So he made sure that the only thing left was smoke and ashes. And they would assume that it was probably the Hebrews because they were the biggest enemy to everyone in that area. And so Achash said, wow, that's great. What's interesting is he was taking that bounty when he would go out and providing for his own, but we'll find, especially toward the end, where he was also sending some of these resources to the elders in back in mainly the primary area of Judah. It's a very morally complicated strategy. Think about it. What's that? To who? Oh, yes, yes. But I mean, the fact that you're lying to Achash, making yourself look like a good Philistine proselyte convert, and then you're murdering people who need a judgment, but you're murdering everybody so they won't rat you out. So it's like, did you have to go that far? That was Saul. Yeah. And there is a part of that where that could very well be a part of what God's judgment was anyway, as part of that judgment. But that's what I mean about a little morally complicated. Yeah, but the children aren't. But the children could rat him out and say, hey, King Achash, that was David's boys. And they grow up angry. That was another thing in the old days, right? Because all you did was create martyrs. So that's what I mean about this whole time. But it's a movement. It's providential, and all these years are preparing him, and he's going to stay over here. And then what happens is then we see where the Philistines are lining up and they're massing together all the kings. Remember, they were not a nation. They were like city states. So you had 5 main cities of Philistines, and they didn't always get along among themselves unless it was against the Hebrews. And then they could all say, yeah, well, we'll kill Hebrews all day long. And so they mass up and they go north, and they're going to go north and attack the Hebrews. And David comes along and goes, I'll go with you. And Achash is good with it. Matter of fact, Achash has already said, I'll make you my bodyguard. Right? Well, what happens is it's not him. King Achash is solid with him. It's the other ones, and all the other leaders go, whoa, we don't want that guy going with us. Because in the heat of battle, we have a feeling his bloodline and his true alliance might snap. And now we've got enemy behind us and with us, and he could turn easily. So they had no trust. They're like, send him home. Send him home. Now see, God's setting this up because God's going to take Saul out. My thing is, if David would have been on the battlefield, he would have saved Saul. And God doesn't want him there. God does not want David to save Jonathan or Saul, because that's what he would have done. He may not have turned on the Philistines and killed them all, but I guarantee, I'm positive he would have said, no, Saul's being overrun over there, and he would have gone out there. Jonathan? Absolutely, right? He would have put every effort on that battlefield to save Jonathan and to save the king. And God, So I think God, again, providentially is like putting distrust with those other Philistines, rightfully so, and saying, no, we don't want him to go. So Achash goes, I'm sorry, you need to go home. What's interesting, though, is when he gets back to Ziklag, the Amalekites raided him and took all their families, all the men that were with him that were going to go on this venture. They come back and their families have all been taken. His wives, David's wives, have been taken. And it says there, they were getting ready to stone him. They were so mad at David. And David, he pursued, and this is another time where he inquired of the Lord. He says, do I go after them? And the Lord said, yes. And I think the Lord's going, yeah, keep going that way. I want you to go that direction because that direction is where I'm fixing to take Saul out. So not only does he get David to go back home, but he gets him further away and distracted while God's going to take care of Saul on the north country. So he pursues and he overtakes him and he gets everything back. And he comes back. There is a story in there where we see the heart of David that's important. It's not just about him going out and retrieving and getting his wives and all their stuff back. But there's a moral to this because there were some men who were so exhausted that they could not continue the pursuit. And so he kind of leaves them behind with the supplies and the trains, in other words, and David goes light. He like, okay, who can go on? Okay, you guys, let's go. You guys go and stay here, man. You can't, you're exhausted. You can't continue this way. So he takes off. They're successful. When they come back, they not only bring back what they had lost, they bring back more, don't they? Because this band that had come in, they had been raiding a lot of people. So they had a lot of booty on them. They were carrying money and all sorts of stuff. And so they come back with even more. And there's an argument, there's a debate. And the guys who went on and successfully accomplished it and come back are upset because David is going to equally distribute it to all the men. And the ones who went and could hang were very mad at the malingerers, the ones who couldn't hang. They don't deserve it. David go, no. They're a part of us. Isn't that beautiful? No. They're a part of us. Everybody's getting a share of this. And that's when we see that he not only then came back with that, but then he then took a portion and sends it to the elders in Judah. So these are the things like in the middle of that. But there's a big game going on here, isn't there? God's judgment is finally coming on Saul and Jonathan. It's unfortunately, but Jonathan as well. And he's got to get David out of there. He's got to get him south, get him away to where no matter how hard he would run, ride, or whatever, he would never be able to make it on time. So let's go back up north. Chapter 28 is where we see then the lining up of the battle before, the lining up of the forces. And Saul is unnerved. He is just all over the place emotional. He's like, and he is doing everything he can to try to get an answer from God. He's so terrified, but he won't talk to him. And so he does something that is so forbidden that his own law, that if anybody was a medium, a sorcerer, or anything, they were to be executed, killed. Now he himself is seeking one. So he seeks a forbidden medium. And what's fascinating, again, if you go to a map, he had to travel like almost like right in front of the Philistines and near the Philistine line to get to this median that night. A dangerous journey to go to this median. When he goes there, he deceives her and he wants to conjure up Samuel. And she says, you know that this is bad. You know, the king of the land said, you can't do this. I mean, I'm not going to do this. And he goes, no, go ahead. And so he coaches her into it. What's fascinating is it worked. And the shock of her, right? Because when it works, she's all of a sudden freaking out herself, huh? She's like, whoa! And she starts screaming, and then Saul's like, what? And he goes, I see it. What do you see? Tell me. And she describes Samuel to a T. And he goes, that's Samuel. And then she's like, you tricked me. She knew, cover's blown. She knew he's the king. Samuel's not happy. You've disturbed me to do what? Well, the king, I've inquired by, the Urim, I've acquired and I've prayed and I've got no visions. And he goes, yeah, it's because of what I told you. I told you. The kingdom's torn from you. God's not talking to you. And why do you think, he doesn't say this, but it's almost like, so what do you think I'm going to talk to you? I've already talked to you. He does kind of say that. I've already told you what's going to happen. You're going to lose the kingdom. Your dynasty's going to die. And then what's fascinating, he says, and tomorrow, all your boys and you are going to be where I'm at, dead. He collapses to the point where he won't eat. And I can see this medium, the sorceress, she's wanting to get him out of there. But he's laying on the ground. He won't eat. And she's trying to get him to eat. She finally gets him to eat because they coach him. He recovers, and he goes back. And this is where, I already did that. We already talked about that. So the next day during the battle, the Israelites are decisively beat. Jonathan and his 3 sons basically are killed. When they go back through and they go through the Philistines, and matter of fact, whenever the Israelites see each other being defeated and all this, they run. They abandoned the cities even. And the Philistines, it says, came in and just took over. Like, oh, cool, they just ran. They find the body of King Saul. They behead him, and then they strap his body up in front of the gate of a city. Remember, it's been a while back, but Gilead was the first time we saw the greatness of Saul, where they were being attacked, and Saul come right following an ox back. It's like, what happened? I thought you became king. And all of a sudden, it's like this conflict occurs, and he rises up. The Spirit of the Lord comes on him. Man, he rallies everybody, and they travel all the way over there. Remember, Gilead, Jabesh Gilead is across the Jordan. They go over there, and they save the city. I thought it was interesting that these are the men who then come by night, travel a great distance across the enemy lines, because now it's enemy lines, pull his body down, take his body back, cremate it, and then bury him. And it's the same city. So it's almost like bookends, the great event that brought him, and then you have these men, the same city. I don't know. So we're going to go ahead and just kind of wrap real quick. Let's, some of the practical applications, a good beginning is not enough. And the pressure that you see this in people, a lot of times pressure will pull out what the real character of a person is. The other major lesson is partial obedience is not obedience. It's disobedience. You can't partially obey the Lord. And the great lesson we've seen in this is that, one, godly leadership requires humility. No room for pride for yourself. And the thing about David inquiring through the priest constantly is this idea, this wise counsel, especially coming from God. It will always save us from sin. All right. We'll jump to 2 Samuel next week. I know they're kind of going long. We'll slow it down a little bit, but we'll go ahead and do that. Hope you'll be able to make it back next week at 6 p.m. for our Bible study continuing in Samuel. Sunday morning, 9:45 for Bible study, 10:45 for worship, and then 4 p.m. and Sunday afternoon we have worship and also. So I hope we can see you then. Until then, God bless.